I've been a quiet man most of my life. 63 years of keeping my head down, doing the work, earning what I have. The day my son looked me in the eye and told me to get on my knees and beg his wife for forgiveness, that was the day I finally understood that silence had been costing me more than I ever knew. So let me tell you what happened, friends. Let me tell you the whole thing. My name is not important. What's important is this. I built something. Not from luck. Not from inheritance. Not from anybody handing me a single thing. I grew up in a small town outside of Knoxville, Tennessee, the son of a man who worked the line at a paper mill for 31 years and never once complained about it. My father taught me that your name is the only currency that truly compounds over time. He said, "Son, money comes and goes. Your name either builds interest or loses it. Guard it like it's the only thing you own, because one day it will be." I took that seriously. I spent 4 decades building a name in commercial real estate development. Small projects at first, a strip mall here, a warehouse conversion there. By the time I was 50, I had developed a reputation in the Mid-Atlantic region as someone who delivered on budget, on time, and with integrity. I wasn't flashy. I didn't go on television. I didn't need to. In my world, your reputation walked into the room before you did, and mine opened doors that money alone couldn't. I have one son. His name is Daniel. And I want you to understand something before I say another word about what happened. I loved that boy with everything I had. Still do. That love is the reason this story hurt the way it did. You can't be betrayed by a stranger. Betrayal requires closeness. It requires trust. And I had given Daniel both in full measure. Daniel is 34. He works in real estate to commercial brokerage, tenant representation, a field adjacent to mine but different enough that we never competed. When he was 28, he married a woman named Courtney. She was attractive, confident, ambitious, the kind of woman who fills a room the moment she walks in. I liked her at first. She had energy. She made Daniel laugh in a way I hadn't seen since he was a kid. I gave them my blessing without reservation. But something shifted in the first 2 years. Little things. Courtney began to reference my career in social settings in a way that felt proprietary, like my accomplishments were a family asset she had married into and now owned a share of. She'd say things like, "Well, Daniel's father has been doing this for 40 years, so we have a certain standard to uphold." We, as if she had built anything. As if she had ever poured concrete or negotiated a zoning variance, or sat across from a bank that wanted to call your loan. I noticed. I said nothing. I am a quiet man. Daniel seemed unaware of it, or perhaps he had simply stopped noticing. When you live with someone, you stop hearing the notes that outsiders catch immediately. I told myself it was harmless. I told myself Courtney was young and ambitious, and that ambition sometimes came out sideways. I gave her the benefit of the doubt the way you do when someone is family. I should have trusted what I noticed. About 8 months ago, this would have been last autumn, I received a phone call from a man named Warren Bullock. Warren runs a regional development fund out of Richmond, Virginia. He is not a close friend, but he is a respected colleague, someone I have dealt with professionally for over 15 years. The kind of man whose call you always take. Warren called to tell me he was excited about the project. He said he had reviewed the partnership documents and that he was confident the fund would move forward. He mentioned, almost in passing, that he was glad I had finally decided to put my name on something with Daniel. He said, "Your involvement gives this whole thing credibility, Lawrence. I have to be honest. Without you attached, I'm not sure the committee would have moved." I sat very still. I told Warren, as calmly as I could, that I was glad he called and that I would need to review the documents before we went any further. I asked him to email me everything he had on file. He said, "Of course," and we hung up, and I sat in my kitchen for a long time looking out at the yard, because I had never agreed to be attached to anything with Daniel. I had never signed a partnership document. I had never reviewed a project proposal. I had never, not once, told Daniel he could use my name in a professional submission to an investment committee. The documents arrived within the hour. I opened them slowly, the way you open something when part of you already knows what's inside. There it was, a development partnership prospectus, 38 pages, professionally formatted. And on the cover page, listed as a co-developer and strategic advisor, my full name, my professional credentials, my 40-year track record, described in language I had never written and never approved. I read the entire document. It was well done. I'll give them that. But my name was threaded through it like a load-bearing wall. Without it, the structure didn't stand. I want to be honest with you, friends. The first thing I felt was not anger. It was grief. Because I understood immediately that this had been deliberate. This was not a misunderstanding. You do not accidentally list someone as a co-developer on a 38-page prospectus submitted to a regional investment fund. Someone made a choice. Someone calculated that the benefit of using my name outweighed the risk of asking me and being told no. I thought about who in this situation made calculations like that. I called Daniel. He didn't answer. I called again. Voicemail. I sent a text that said only, "Call me. It's important." He called back 40 minutes later, and I could tell from the first syllable that he already knew what this was about. His voice had that particular flatness people get when they're bracing for impact. I told him what Warren had told me. I told him what I had read. I asked him one question. Did you put my name on that document without asking me? There was a pause that told me everything. Then he said, Dad, it's not what it looks like. Courtney handled the presentation materials. We were going to tell you once the fund committed. We knew you'd say yes. I want you to sit with that for a moment, friends. We knew you'd say yes. Not we asked, and you agreed. Not we had a conversation, and you gave your blessing. We assumed your answer, and we acted on our assumption, and we submitted your identity to a financial institution without your knowledge, because we were confident we could present it to you as a done deal, and you would go along with it. I asked to speak to Courtney. She came on the line with a voice I had never quite heard from her before. Smooth and practiced, the way people talk when they've already rehearsed the conversation in their heads. She told me that she had listed me as a strategic advisor because my involvement had always been implied. She told me that I had mentioned, at a dinner the previous spring, that I thought Daniel had strong instincts for identifying undervalued properties. She said she had taken that as an expression of confidence in the project. I said, Courtney, complimenting my son's instincts at dinner is not a signed partnership agreement submitted to Warren Bullock's investment committee. She said, Lawrence, we thought you'd be proud. I said, I need my name removed from every document, every version, everything submitted, everything pending, everything filed. Before Monday, the line went very quiet. Then she said, if you do this, you'll destroy everything we've worked for. I said, I didn't work for any of it. That's the problem. And I hung up. Now, friends, I want to be honest about what happened inside me that weekend, because I think it matters. I almost called back. Saturday morning, I sat in my chair with the phone in my hand for 45 minutes. I thought about Daniel, at 8 years old, building model buildings out of cardboard boxes on the kitchen floor. I thought about teaching him to read a survey map when he was 12. I thought about the pride on his face at his college graduation, and how I had gripped his shoulder in the parking lot afterward and told him his grandfather would have been beside himself. I thought about all of that, and I almost made the call, and I almost said, fine, let's work something out. Let's put something on paper retroactively. Let's find a way through this without burning everything down. I almost did that. But then I remembered what my father told me. Your name is the only thing that truly compounds. And I thought about Warren Bullock's voice on the phone without you attached. I'm not sure the committee would have moved, and I understood that my name had been used precisely because it carried 40 years of compound trust. Trust I had built through decades of delivering what I promised. And if I allowed it to be borrowed without consent once, I was telling the world it could be borrowed without consent again. I put the phone down. I called Warren Bullock on Monday morning. I told him there had been a significant misunderstanding regarding my involvement in the project. I told him I had not authorized the use of my name or credentials in any capacity, and that I was formally requesting they be removed from all documentation. Warren was professional about it, but I could hear the awkwardness, and I knew what that awkwardness meant. It meant the committee's enthusiasm for the project had just changed. What I did not know, what I would not find out until later, was what was happening on Daniel and Courtney's end in those same hours. 2 weeks passed. I heard nothing from Daniel, nothing from Courtney. The silence told me something important. They were not remorseful. They were regrouping. Then Daniel called and asked if he could come to the house. He said there were things we needed to discuss as a family. He said Courtney would be coming with him. They arrived on a Saturday afternoon, my birthday weekend, as it happened. Not my actual birthday, which was the following day, but the Saturday. I had not put that together when I agreed to the visit, and I don't know if Daniel had. But I noticed now that it was a loaded setting, the same way that certain dates carry weight regardless of what you plan for them. I had made coffee. I set out cups. I sat at my kitchen table, which is where I have made every serious decision of my adult life, and I waited. Daniel sat across from me. Courtney sat beside him. I noticed immediately that their chairs were pulled close together in a way that was meant to communicate unity. They had talked about this visit. They had arranged themselves. Daniel spoke first. He told me he understood I was upset. He told me the situation had not been handled the way it should have been. He said that Courtney was going to apologize and that he hoped we could find a way to move past this as a family. Courtney leaned forward. She said she was sorry that I felt blindsided. She said her intentions had been to honor my legacy and bring the family together professionally. She said she had made a mistake in the execution, but that her heart had been in the right place. I want to stop here, friends, and just let you hear that language. Sorry that I felt blindsided. Not sorry for what she did. Sorry for how I experienced what she did. There is a world of difference between those two things, and every one of you listening knows exactly what that difference feels like when you hear it. I thanked her for saying that. Then I told them both, calmly and clearly, what I needed. I needed a written acknowledgement from both of them that my name had been used without authorization. I needed confirmation from Warren Bullock's fund that my name had been fully removed. And I needed some time. I did not know how much time before I was ready to be in the kind of relationship with Courtney where I was attending dinners and celebrating holidays and pretending that this had been a misunderstanding in good faith. Daniel's jaw tightened. Courtney looked at her hands for a moment. Then she looked up. She said, "Lawrence, I have worked for 2 years on this project. 2 years. And you are going to torpedo it over a technicality about paperwork." I said, "It's not a technicality. It's my name." She said, "Your name that you were never going to use for anything like this anyway. You're retired. What does it cost you?" And that was when Daniel, my son, the boy I taught to read survey maps, put his hand on the table and said, "Dad, I need you to let this go. I need you to apologize to Courtney for how you've handled this, and I need us to move forward. Because if you can't do that," he paused. He looked at me steadily. "Then I don't know what our relationship looks like going forward." I looked at my son for a long moment. I want you to know that the room was very quiet. I could hear the refrigerator running. I could hear a car passing on the street outside. I thought about my father again. I thought about 34 years of showing up for that boy. I thought about what it would mean to say the words Courtney was waiting for me to say, to apologize to a woman who had committed what amounted to identity fraud against me in my own kitchen, with my son sitting there nodding along. I stood up. I picked up my coffee cup, walked to the sink, rinsed it, and set it down. And then I said, very quietly, so that both of them had to be still to hear it, "Watch how far you fall." That was it. 5 words. I walked to the front door, opened it, and waited. They left. I closed the door and stood in the hallway for a while. I'm not going to tell you I felt triumphant. That is not what that moment felt like. It felt like something had broken that could not be put back the way it was. And I grieved that, right there in my hallway, on the afternoon before my 64th birthday. But I did not regret it. Here is what happened in the weeks that followed, friends, because I think you deserve to know the full shape of this story. Warren Bullock's fund declined the project. Without my name on the prospectus, the committee had questions about the project's anchor credibility that Daniel and Courtney could not answer to the committee's satisfaction. A smaller local investor they had been in conversations with withdrew as well. Apparently word travels in these circles, and the circumstances around the name removal had become known. The project did not die immediately, but it was wounded in a way that is very difficult to recover from in commercial real estate, where perception is the project in its early stages. About 6 weeks after that Saturday in my kitchen, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail. The message was from a man named Ted Morrow, Courtney's father, whom I had met twice at family events and barely knew. He said he'd heard things had gotten complicated between our families and wondered if we could talk. I called him back. What Ted told me in the next 20 minutes rearranged some things I thought I understood. He told me that Courtney had, over the past several years, mentioned to multiple people in their social circle that she was concerned about my mental sharpness, that I had been making some errors in my business dealings, that the family had been gently encouraging me to step back from decision making. He said he had assumed this was just Courtney being cautious and protective, the way children sometimes are about aging parents. He said he was calling because he had recently seen some of the documentation from the prospectus through his own real estate connections, and had realized that what Courtney had described as me stepping back from decision making was actually the opposite. My name had been placed on a major financial document, and when he had asked Courtney directly about it, she had told him that I had early stage cognitive decline and had agreed to the arrangement and then forgotten about it. Ted said, "Lawrence, I want you to know that I don't believe that, and I'm sorry." I sat with that for a very long time after we hung up. She had not just used my name. She had been building a story around me slowly, quietly, in the background that would explain away any objection I raised. A man with cognitive decline who agreed to things and forgot. A man whose memory couldn't be trusted. A man whose name could be on a document that he had no memory of signing because that was just how things were now with him. I thought about how long she had been constructing that. I thought about how close I had come to just letting it go that Saturday in my kitchen. How close I came to saying I'm sorry just to keep the peace. What that apology would have done to me not just personally, but professionally. If I had apologized to Courtney and gone along with the arrangement, I would have been confirming, in the eyes of everyone who knew about this situation, that the story she had been telling about me was true. That I was the confused old man who had signed something he didn't understand, and then made a scene about it. I called my attorney on a Monday morning, not because I had decided to take legal action, though we discussed that I had grounds, but because I needed someone to help me document everything clearly and correctly while the timeline was still fresh. I also reached out to Warren Bullock and had a direct, frank conversation with him about what I had learned. Warren, to his credit, listened carefully and told me he appreciated me telling him. He also told me, quietly, that he had heard some of the things being said about my cognitive state, and that he had wondered about them when I called him that first Monday morning. He said, "Lawrence, that call was one of the clearest, most direct conversations I've had with anyone in this business in years. I didn't give it much weight after that. I was glad he told me." Daniel reached out about 2 months after that Saturday. A text first, then a phone call. I took the call. He did not immediately apologize. He asked how I was doing, the way you ask when you don't quite know how to get to what you actually need to say. We talked around the edges for a few minutes. Then he said, "Dad, I didn't know about the things Courtney was telling people, about your memory. I want you to know that." I told him I believed that, because I do. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I should have asked you before any of this happened. I should have come to you directly and asked. Instead, I let her handle it, and I told myself it was going to be fine, and I didn't look closely enough at what she was doing." He paused again. "I'm sorry, Dad. That apology cost him something. I could hear it. The real ones always cost something. That's how you know they're real." I told him I accepted it. I told him that the path back to what we were before this was going to take some time and some honesty from both of us, and that I was willing to walk that path if he was. He said he was. We didn't talk about Courtney. Not that day. There will be time for those conversations. I have learned in 63 years that you cannot have every important conversation at once. You have them in the order that the relationship can bear. What I want to tell you now, friends, those of you who are parents, those of you who have worked your whole lives to build something that you can be proud of and that your name can stand behind, is this. The people who love you will ask. They will come to you and they will explain what they need, and they will ask if you are willing. And if the answer is yes, you will give it freely, because that is what love does. It gives freely, and it gives gladly. The people who use you will assume. They will look at what you have, and they will calculate whether you are more useful as a willing participant or an unknowing resource, and they will make their choice based on that calculation. And when you object, they will tell you that your objection is the problem, that you are being difficult, that you are being selfish, that after everything they've done, the least you could do is this one thing. Don't do the one thing. Because the one thing is never just the one thing. It is the first thing. It is the thing that tells them and tells you who you are in this relationship. And once you have told them, through your silence or your surrender, that your boundaries are negotiable, they will negotiate them every time, further and further, until you look up one day and you are standing in your own kitchen, in your own house, on your own birthday weekend, being asked to apologize for protecting your own name. I am 63 years old. I spent 40 years building something my father would have recognized. Not just a business, but a reputation, a way of operating in the world that made your word mean something. I almost let someone dismantle that in the name of keeping peace at the dinner table. I am glad I stood up. I am glad I walked to that sink and rinsed that cup and said what I said, quietly, so they had to be still to hear it. I am glad I walked to the front door. And if you are sitting somewhere right now, friends, if you are a parent, a grandparent, someone who has built something through decades of honest work, and you are weighing whether to hold your ground or let it go one more time, just to keep things smooth, just to avoid the difficult conversation, I want you to hear this. Your name is the only currency that truly compounds. Guard it like it's the only thing you own. Because one day your father was right, and my father was right. And you already know this, even if nobody has said it to you plainly. One day it will be. Thank you for sitting with me through this one, friends. It was not an easy one to tell, but the hard ones are usually the ones that matter. You take care of yourselves. I mean that